well, thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. My name is Mike Ogburn. I'm on the CLEER team here, and I'm going to be helping just facilitate today's webinar. My background ranges from some time at Cummins Diesel to working on Ford's hybrid programs, and then also working with CLEER on everything from electric vehicles to tracking energy use on large buildings. So if you have any questions for me, feel free, but I imagine you're going to have plenty more interesting questions for our speakers today. So we have now, let's see, 28 people participating. We've got 6 panelists, 22 different attendees. So thank you everybody for making time to be here today. We were checking the list for who's participating, and we have at least 13 electrical co-ops who are planning on joining today. We have 1 generation transmission provider. We have an investor-owned utility participating, and also municipality. So we have the pretty good representation from across the spectrum of people in the community and also from across the whole state. To help us know who's here today, I was wondering if you would all be willing to take a quick lesson in Zoom, and we're going to have you edit your name or append to the end of your name the organization you work with. So if you're viewing your Zoom screen, what I can see down at the bottom on mine is a button that says participants. If you click that participants button, it'll bring up a list of everybody that's here, and you can find yourself in that list. Hopefully your screen works exactly like mine. So when you put your mouse over your own name, 2 buttons pop up. One of them says more, and in that more list is rename. So rename gives you the chance to add the name. I've added CLEER for CLEER to the end of my name. If you are able to click on that participants tab, click on the attendees, click on your name, and click on more, you could add the name of the utility or organization you are with to your attendee's name so that we can all maybe more easily identify one another. Once you've edited your name, it gives you the chance to just click a little blue rename button or click cancel if you messed it up. And then that should take effect for all of us to see. So thank you everybody for bearing with me on that administrative note. All right, so a little overview for today. Today is going to be 3 presentations. We're going to start off first with my colleague from CLEER. His name is Stefan Johnson. He's going to give an overview of the Colorado Clean Diesel program, talk about some of the funding that's available and how the application process is being put together. As you know, there's one category that has quite a bit of interest in it, which is this bucket truck category, hybrid and all-electric bucket trucks. So there are a number of manufacturers that offer those vehicles, and we are pleased to have 2 manufacturers join our call today to give us an overview. First, after Stefan gives us that overview, we'll hear from Mark McGrew, Senior Sales Manager with Lion Electric. Hello, Mark. Thank you very much. And then we also have another Mark Baer. He's the Green Fleet Specialist with Alltech. So thank you, Mark number 2. And then I imagine you're going to have some questions. So while we're doing those questions, we're going to make sure, or while you have those questions, we're going to make sure that we have time at the end for both some questions and a broader Q&A, kind of free form time to answer questions and get into discussions about how you can participate in this program. So to keep the presentations rolling, what we're going to ask you to do is enter questions about the presentation into the chat window. So one of the buttons available to you down at the bottom is chat. And inside that chat, I can see we already have some questions coming in. I'll address those in just a minute. But that would be a place to type in questions for the presenters. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on those, and then as necessary, maybe interrupt for Q&A with the ongoing panelists, and maybe save some of those questions for the end. So that's it for the administrative details about how today's conference is going to go. And then let me now go to hand off to Stefan Johnson. And first, Stefan, I think we might want to double check our chat. I see a few folks asking questions we might need to address before we get going.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Mike. So I think on the background settings with Zoom, we don't have the ability for participants to label themselves. So what people have been doing has been entering their name and organization into the chat function, which I think is just as helpful. So that'll be a great interim solution since we didn't quite have the Zoom settings correct. I'll dive into things now, though. Thanks to everyone for joining this morning. We really appreciate it. My name, as Mike mentioned, is Stefan Johnson, and I'm the Transportation Program Manager for CLEER, Clean Energy Economy for the region, and also the lead on the Colorado Clean Diesel Program. And so before we hear from our technology providers that we're lucky to have with us this morning, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the program, the funding that's available, and how we hope the application process will work for everybody. So if we could go on to the next slide, please, Maisa. So just for a little bit of context, CLEER contracted with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment just this year to manage and oversee the state's Diesel Emissions Reduction Act allocated funding. And the overarching purpose of this program, of course, is to protect human health and improve air quality by reducing harmful diesel emissions. And so, kind of the big framework that CLEER has been thinking about with CDPHE in tandem is how we can best leverage this funding to align with the state's climate goals, while accelerating the deployment of low carbon and zero emissions technologies while fulfilling all of the eligibility criteria. And just something that I think a lot of people on this call are probably aware of, but we're at a pretty exciting point in the market where we're starting to see some new technologies that are starting to become economically viable that weren't previously. And if you look back at the database of most of the projects that have been funded through DERA, oftentimes it was replacing older diesel engines with newer diesel engines, which certainly has, it's not trivial, those improvements we've made in efficiency, but now we have our eyes on some really exciting hybrid and fully electric technologies that we're going to hear a little bit more about shortly. Next slide, please, Maisa. Great, thank you. So in terms of the funding we have available, there is currently $725,000 that we are looking to distribute as soon as possible, assuming that we receive some really quality project applications. And just a little bit of background. So $450,000 of that 725 is coming from the federal EPA Diesel Emissions Reduction Act funding. And then Colorado chose to voluntarily provide a match to unlock the maximum level of funding coming from the EPA, and that's coming out of the state's Volkswagen Beneficiary Mitigation Plan. And then important to note that an additional $1.5 million has been set aside from that VW-BMP as a DERA option. So if we do receive a high volume of really quality applications, there is the potential for us to tap into that funding sooner rather than later. And the state is working to finalize the next round of EPA funding from DERA. So there is lots of funding available, and it's very, very exciting. And we're eager to distribute it to some utilities and municipalities and other folks with bucket trucks in their fleets. Next slide, please. And again, I don't want to belabor the bureaucratic processes that go into the funding, but just so everyone knows, in thinking about the different technologies that we could fund, we had to kind of thread the needle with a particular Venn diagram. So there's a slate of technologies that are eligible under the federal DERA program that we, of course, must comply with. And then we also must fund new technologies and can't overlap or double dip with any existing funding programs in the state. So for example, the Colorado Department of Transportation has a transit bus replacement program. And And so obviously we cannot fund transit buses. Similarly, there's the Alt Fuels program with the Regional Air Quality Council that funds school buses, shuttles, freight switchers. We cannot fund those types of projects. And then finally, a portion of the funding that comes from Colorado's VWBMP must go towards zero emissions technology solutions. And that is because shortly after taking office in 2019, Governor Polis had an executive order that mandated that all VW funds go towards zero emission technologies. And so that leaves us with a refined list of technologies that we are looking to provide grant funding for. Next slide, please. Just to further that point, there is a list of technologies that are eligible for funding that includes particularly relevant for today's discussion, class 5 through 8 bucket trucks. And just to be explicit, by bucket trucks, we mean any class 5 through 8 trucks that have an electric powered PTO, whether that's powering an aerial unit or a derrick drill, is not all of those categories with PTO are eligible for funding. Next slide, please. And while we're extremely lucky to have 2 companies with us this morning to present an overview of their latest product offerings, I also want to be explicit that there are other vendors and companies that are also eligible for funding. So just to list a few of them, there's Terex, there's VersaLift, and a host of other companies that manufacture integrated bucket trucks with PTOs. And so there is a diverse array of options that are potentially eligible for funding under our program. Next slide, please. So how does that grant funding break down? These percentages are mandated to us from the EPA's DEER program. We have no control over the maximum eligible funding available. So for hybrid bucket trucks, what that looks like is a maximum grant of 25% of the total project cost. For all electric bucket trucks, it's significantly higher, 45% of the total project cost, so almost half. And then also important to note that electrical infrastructure, including charging stations, needed to support the fleet operations of these new vehicles can be included in one's total project cost. Also worth noting that in the case of all electric bucket trucks where charging stations would be a requirement, you're also eligible to apply for funding for charging stations under the Charge Ahead Colorado program with the Colorado Energy Office or the RAC. And we're going to make explicit that you can choose one or the other. If you're going to go through Charge Ahead Colorado, you cannot include the charging stations under your total project cost with us, and vice versa. If you go through us and include the charging stations under your total project cost, we're going to work with RAC and CO to make sure that they know that, and you cannot go through the Charge Ahead Colorado funding program. Next slide, please. Another super important point about the program that cannot be missed or overstated is that there is a scrappage requirement. So in order to be eligible for the funding, the applicant must scrap an existing like-for-like vehicle in their fleet by drilling a 3-inch hole in the engine block. And once again, the specifications are a little bit different depending on whether you're seeking a hybrid bucket truck or an electric bucket truck. So if you're applying for a hybrid bucket truck option, the existing vehicle that you're scrapping must have an engine model year of 1996 to 2009. If you are applying for an all-electric bucket truck, you have a little bit more leeway and can have a newer existing vehicle that you are scrapping. It can be as new as this year, which we don't anticipate anyone scrapping a brand new bucket truck, but it's technically eligible. Next slide, please. So in terms of the timing, we currently have the first grant window open now through October 30th. And then we anticipate reviewing applications through the month of November, and are really going to try and set some things in motion before the holiday season gets too busy. We know it's a hectic time, but we do hope to give applicants a notification of their status by the very end of November, and then work to come to an end user agreement so that we can sort of hash out some of the details about how the process will move forward. And then so in 2021, what that looks like is executing a purchase order. Once you have received your new vehicle, you must scrap your existing vehicle that you've identified within 60 days. And then once we've received all of the proper document verification that the scrappage took place and that you have the new vehicle in your fleet and ready to go into operations, then we will issue the reimbursement grant within 90 days of that. And it is important to note that it is a reimbursement grant. We will not be able to distribute funding until all reporting, documentation, and verification has taken place. Next slide, please. So, in looking at lots of other state programs with DERA funding and other pools of funding, we really tried to pull from best practices and avoid applications that seemed overly cumbersome and really administratively intense. We've done lots of work with government grants in our time as an organization, and we certainly can empathize with the frustrations that organizations must go to and the hoops they must jump through to receive this funding. So we really did make our best effort to try and streamline the process and make it as pain-free as possible for anyone that chooses to submit an application. And so Maisa, if you could, let's see if we can actually go to the website and take a look at what we have designed in terms of that application process. Trying a little bit of a trick that might involve some technical difficulties. Are you able to share open the other screen with the tab to the website? Okay, we're still on the slide. Bear with us for a few quick moments to see if we can get the website up. There we go. This looks more like it almost.
Perfect.
Yes, okay. Now everyone can see we've designed the application to be very simple. So if you'll scroll down, we have some really brief contact information, and then there's some files that you must upload in terms of kind of showing which vehicle you intend to scrap, a few kind of certifications that you have, to the best of your knowledge, complied with all requirements. Then if you scroll up a little bit further, Maisa, or down a little bit, okay, project worksheet. Can you click on that? Okay, well, it's opening up an Excel file. I thought that might go a little bit smoother, but we really wanted to emphasize that we've tried to make this application process as streamlined as possible. And so anyone that's on the line can go to cocleandiesel.org, go to apply for a grant, and check out all of the requirements and download the spreadsheet that we were asking folks to upload. We think that we've designed something that should be as minimalist as possible. So apologies for the little bit of technical difficulties in trying to demonstrate that. We'll go back to the slides, and that is the conclusion of my presentation and overview of our program and the funding available and the application process.
Stefan, this is Mike. Just checking in on that Excel spreadsheet. So once it downloads and the person opens it, can you give just 20 seconds of what would be inside the Excel spreadsheet? I'm guessing you have some populated information where you're going to ask the user to type in maybe some details about what they're proposing.
Yes. I definitely should know these a little bit better off the top of my head, but it is, we do have some drop-down menus. So it really will, you'll select the technology that you're applying from the refined list of the eligible technologies that we are funding. And then from those drop-down menus, that will also, it'll create the calculators for you to show, what the cost share is at a maximum level. And then we were asking for some information about the vehicle that you intend to scrap, as well as a little bit of operational information in terms of the fuel usage on an annual basis, the calculated idle time that the vehicle is running in idle mode versus turned off, so that we could calculate the potential emissions reductions with the vehicle. So sorry, I'm scrambling a little bit here, Mike. I definitely should know those topics a little bit better. But
that's okay. I think the only reason I asked is simply because they're going to be downloading that form. They'll fill it out, and then that's one of the attachments that they provide in that application screen. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Great. And then for criteria for judging the grant, I believe one of the criteria is the amount of emissions avoided, fuel consumed, et cetera, as a criteria. Are there any other key criteria worth mentioning for how grants might be prioritized?
Yes, that's a great question, Mike. Thank you for raising that. So if we do receive a high volume of quality applications, one criteria that we will look at is prioritizing projects that are in the non-attainment areas for different pollution criteria, particularly ozone. So that being primarily concentrated in the Front Range of the state. And then we also have the applicant's cost share. If they choose to request less funding than the maximum they are eligible for, that is of course attractive to us in terms of making the dollars go further. And then we also have innovation as a kind of key thing that we're looking to highlight. So if there's anything particularly novel about the project, or whether it would be truly a first in state sort of vehicle or operations, then that would also be prioritized.
Got it. And is it also fair to say that replacing a brand new, relatively clean truck that only goes a few miles a year might not have the same priority as a dirtier truck that has a much heavier duty cycle with more miles traveled, gallons burned, et cetera?
Yes, most definitely. And yeah, we think that will be reflected in the emissions calculations that will be made. But yes, getting the older, most polluting trucks off the road first is definitely a priority for us.
Got it. So anybody still operating a 1996 vehicle, which was the first year available, that might win. Who knows? There's a number of things going on in there. So thank you, Stefan. I appreciate your presentation. I've got some good comments coming in. Don't see any questions at this time about Stefan's presentation. So we will hold any additional questions that you might have for Stefan about the program in general till that discussion at the end, and move ahead next to Mark McGrew, Senior Sales Manager with Lion Electric. I see we've got the slide up and running. Mark, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mike and Stefan. Happy to be here, and thank you all for joining today. I'm going to take the next 15-20 minutes to provide an overview on Lion as a company, who we are, where we came from, talk a little bit about the new application that we have in an all-electric utility bucket truck that's going to be coming out early next year, and talk a little bit about service support, infrastructure, charging requirements, and I hope you guys will all walk away today with a very good understanding as far as what's available and what's coming down the road. So next slide. So I want to start out with who Lion is. Many of you may or may not heard of us. If you have, it was likely from the school buses that we have been building for the last 4.5 years. Lion has cut its teeth with the electric school bus. We've been building electric school buses since 2016, and we have over 300 of them on the road today, picking up children throughout North America. Many of you may be thinking, how does that have any correlation to truck? And it's a really good question. But when you take the yellow box off of the school bus, what's left is a Class 7 truck chassis. So we've got great experience over the last 4.5 years in starting with frame rails and purpose building electric vehicles from the ground up. On the powertrain, so the battery and the electric motor that we're using, we now have over 4 million miles driven. That's in real world miles. And the same powertrain that we're using on our school buses, and we have made multiple iterations to the software, is the same powertrain that we brought over to our truck when we launched our division in March of 2019. Really what that means is that we're coming in with a lot of knowledge and a lot of speed bumps along the way, as any and all OEMs going into the electric space are going to face. We are headquartered out of Saint Jerome, which is up in Montreal in the province of Quebec. Today, that's where our manufacturing and battery lab is. At that facility, we have the capacity of producing 2,500 electric vehicles per year. I will also state that we are already looking at and working on our first US manufacturing facility that is likely going to be on the West Coast, since we've got our facility in Montreal. But we do have plans to not only add an additional manufacturing facility on the East Coast, but we are also looking to open a battery manufacturer here in the next 24 months. Our R&D facility, again, is headquartered up in Saint Jerome, but we plan on having a total of 4 open by 2022. And at each of those factories that we're opening in the US, we'll have comparable, if not slightly higher, manufacturing capacity as we look to highly automate these facilities. Again, what we are doing is we are looking to prepare for growth so that we can keep up with the volume that we anticipate, not only today that we're already receiving, but also in the future as we continue to have more applications that we can offer to end users like yourself. I started with the company about 16 months ago, just to give you guys some knowledge as far as the growth that we've seen just internally and how fast-paced this is moving. There were around 120 employees when I started, and today we're up to 360. I think we had around 25 engineers at that time, and now we're up to 95 engineers. So things are moving very rapidly. The electric industry is really starting to take off, both in the medium and heavy duty space, and that's where we plan to play. From an offering standpoint on trucks, we will be offering anywhere from Class 5 to Class 8. Today, we have a Class 6 offering, so obviously there are some options available in the aerial devices today on Class 6. And then again, we'll also have a Class 8 truck. Next year, we'll be coming out with a Class 7, so that's going to play nicely into that 33,000-pound bucket truck. So a lot of great things that the future holds for Lion, and we really look forward to working closely with the utilities as well as the governments and municipalities, since we know there are viable applications amongst both sections. Next slide, please. So quickly, I just wanted to talk about the footprint of Lion. What we're doing is we're setting up experience or service centers in our priority target markets throughout the United States and Canada. Today, we already have facilities open in Sacramento, Los Angeles. We opened a facility this summer in Seattle. Albany has been open since last October, and coming on board will be Jacksonville, Phoenix, and Plainfield, South Plainfield, New Jersey. Thanks to our recent announcement. Hopefully some of you saw our partnership with Amazon that was announced earlier this week. Furthermore, into the future, we will be opening up 7 additional facilities in 2021, and I hope you guys see that Colorado is on that list. We understand and recognize that from a state level, not just with the great work that CLEER and other organizations are doing within the state, but there's obviously a large push from the governor, and we know that Colorado is going to be a priority state when it comes to the reduction of harmful emissions. And we have identified that as an area that we will be setting up one of our experience centers to be determined, but in Colorado, as well as the other ones that you see on the right-hand side. Quickly, what that is that is going to be a living and breathing facility for meetings, training. We will stock parts there. We will also have trained technicians that can provide the training on site, come to your facilities to train your technicians and drivers, and or we will also be holding training at those facilities. So it's going to be a multifaceted facility, and that is part of our service strategy throughout the nation as we deploy in different states. Next slide. One of the key factors I'd like you to take away from today is that we are a purpose-built OEM. Again, we live and breathe electric. That's all we do. We are not building any diesel products today. Everything we do will be zero emission. And when we say purpose-built, that means that we're building our own chassis and cab. We're starting from the ground up at the frame rails. We have chosen to make the components that we're using today standard to the truck industry. So when you talk about the axles that we're using, the suspensions, the braking systems, it's all ones that any technician is going to be familiar with, whether it's a Dana rear axle or a Hendrickson front axle. We're using Bendix air brakes. Again, we've chosen to go with as common as possible to make sure that the ease of transition to electric is not going to be an issue for the drivers themselves or for the technicians. We are trying to make the truck as lightweight as possible. We've done that in building our cab with using a variety of steel as well as composite. And we will have regenerative braking anytime the driver lets off the throttle and goes into active coast mode. They will have the regen. That's going to provide a great opportunity for additional brake wear, where we believe it's going to be about 3 times as long. So that's going to help on the maintenance side. Again, really the main thing to talk about with purpose-built is that we are able to put things where they belong, not where they fit. And that's really one of the keys without the difference between taking an existing diesel chassis, retrofitting it with an electric powertrain versus starting from scratch. Next slide. As you probably know, some of the advantages of electrification are on the right-hand side. I won't go into great depth. The numbers that you see in the bubbles, these are real live numbers that we've gotten on the miles that are out there today. We believe the impact that we're going to see in the truck industry because of the duty cycles and the amount of hours that the trucks are run will actually be greater, especially on the maintenance side. Thus far, we've seen an 80% reduction in energy cost. That means the displacement of diesel with going with zero emission, but the cost of then powering the truck with the average cost or kilowatt per hour cost to charge these electric vehicles. On the maintenance side, we have currently today seen a 60% reduction, but we do again believe that that is going to be slightly higher as we start getting miles on these vehicles in the utility world. We'll be able to report back on that. But again, from an OpEx standpoint, you're going to pay more for electric up front, but you're going to see the savings in the out years when you would typically either be looking for a replacement of the vehicle or you would be taking on the burden of high maintenance costs in those years 4 through 8 or beyond. Next slide. From a greenhouse gas emission standpoint, our trucks with going to zero emission have a tremendous impact on the communities in which they're serving. Using the EPA calculator today, some of the applications that we're using, like refuse trucks and other of the Class 8s, are getting up to 85 tons in reductions per year. Again, this is not a wells to wheel number. Every state is different as far as how you produce your electricity. In the states that are doing air or hydro or solar, obviously that's going to be more of a true number. But just from a pure standpoint of diesel reduction or elimination, there is a huge impact on your community. We're anticipating these trucks to last 10 years or longer. So in this scenario, you're talking about 8,500 tons taken away from the communities in which these vehicles will be operating, which is obviously a huge impact and something that we're very excited to get more of these trucks on the road. Next slide. Briefly, I thought it would be helpful because, again, we have 4.5 years of experience as an OEM delivering electric vehicles. And for those of you that had not made the transition yet, or maybe you've done so in light duty, but you have not done so in medium and heavy duty, these are some of the things that we believe you should be looking to do as you take the steps to electrify your fleet. I won't run through them all, but at the end of the day, a couple of the key ones, and I think relevant to this conversation today with Mike and Stefan from CLEER, is when there's funding out there, you may not have all of the expertise or even the resources to be able to spend the time. Lion as an OEM has a dedicated team of 5 employees that works on daily basis with Volkswagen grants, DERA grants, and opportunities as such. We are more than willing to not only help in assisting, but understanding the needs of what it would take place to get an application in to Mike and Stefan for review. So that's something that we bring to the table. Again, we also want to work with the local utilities in making sure that the right infrastructure is in place. And again, we're speaking to an audience that obviously understands that portion of it, but we do have a team called LionEnergy that will handle the entire experience from understanding the specifications of our vehicles, the charging requirements that come along with our battery packs, and making sure that if and when these trucks are purchased and show up, we have the right plan to make sure that they're charged appropriately. And last but not least, I referred back to the experience centers, is we do have a team of folks that will come out and provide all of the necessary training on the truck, whether that be on the high voltage, whether that be on simple preventative maintenance. We do want to train both the drivers and the technicians. And these are really the key 5 things that we think it would take to consider electrification. Next slide. One more. So this is the slide I think that you're all interested in, and that is going to be the all-electric bucket truck offering. I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide just trying to make sure everyone is aware as far as how we're approaching this and what we're going to be doing. So Lion as the OEM will be manufacturing the cab and the chassis. We'll electrify that. It will roll off the ground from our facility and go to the equipment and aerial upfitter. At this point in time, we are open to work with any and all of the upfitters for the equipment out there. However, I can tell you that today we've had one lead equipment manufacturer on the body as well as the aerial. All that means is that we're a little further along in the development with them, but obviously we've been in conversation and started introductions with Alltech as well as Terex and others. So it's not that we're locked into one, but again, timeframes for delivery may change slightly based on the supplier that would be chosen. The vehicle itself will have 2 battery pack offerings, which will of course offer 2 different ranges. The pack sizes will consist of either a 252 kilowatt battery pack or a 336 kilowatt pack. Now, the pack itself will not only be used to propel the vehicle forward, but it will also be used to run the aerial itself. So the way that we will accomplish that is that we will have an EPTO that will be provided upon the delivery of the vehicle to the upfitter for the aerial and the equipment. That EPTO will get its power from our high voltage batteries. And that does mean that it's going to, since it's going to be doing both the propelling of the vehicle forward as well as the operation, that the stated range that we give just for the battery packs will be reduced. At the end of the day, when we talk about the operation of moving the vehicle forward, the operation of the aerial for a standard day, as well as running some auxiliary items like you see on the right-hand side, like electric AC, electric heat, or 12 or 24 volt auxiliary items, the range that we plan on having capacity for will end up right around 100 miles. The starting range for our vehicles are either 130 or 170 miles. The 130 will end up closer to the 100-mile range. The 170-mile pack will end up closer to the 125, 130-mile range. So again, these will really be meant for more in-town. Again, are these going to be able to be dispatched for the emergency services maybe in surrounding states? Probably not. These are applications that we would want to keep closer to home so that they've got the ability to charge overnight. When it comes to charging, Everything that we're doing today is industry standard. We have the capacity and capability of doing either level 2 or level 3. For the utility industry, it's more than likely that we'll end up going with level 3 charging to have these trucks readily available, or perhaps even do some sort of spot or opportunity charging throughout the day to extend the range. So we will be providing the J1772 CCS combo. Again, that port allows you to charge in either level 2 trickle charge up to 19.2 kilowatts, or you could use the CCS combo. Lion has a variety of suppliers as far as charging stations go. We are open to any and all of them as long as the software communicates. And we have tested anywhere from the on the DC side, 25 kilowatts, all the way out to 150 kilowatts today. Now, there are chargers out there that will go that are more powerful, but at this point in time, to respect the integrity of our batteries, the duty cycles, and the warranty, for today, we're only going out to 150 kilowatts as far as the fastest capacity for charge time. Our approach is going to vary for each customer. As you all know, everyone will have a slightly different specification when it comes to where the compartments go and what the body looks like. For today, based on the weight of our batteries, the offerings that we're going to be coming in with today will be in a Class 8 operation. They will today be on a shortened wheelbase tandem. And we will continue to work towards the Class 7, where we can get the single axle in the 33,000 pound range. Some of that's going to be getting the reduction in batteries and the weight of the batteries overall to make sure we can meet your payload requirements. So we're not quite there yet. So for these initial generation 1, first generation bucket trucks today, you would be looking at a shorter tandem for the either the insulated aerial, and we are also starting to work on applications like the cable placers, digger derricks, and cable handlers. We're also in communication with some municipalities today that are interested in the forestry truck for tree trimming services. So that is another application that we're looking at, and we'll be working towards delivery in 2021. Timeline from our standpoint, I saw it in the chat, and I'm sorry, Mike, I might be stealing your thunder. But when it comes to us as an OEM and capable delivery times, right now, any of our deliveries on these Class 8 vehicles are ranging from 6 to 9 months from purchase order to shipment of the actual vehicle to the supplier. And again, at the end of the day, it's up to the Altex of the world, the Posi and Terex of the world to determine what their timelines are. But again, I think a realistic time frame is likely in that 12 to 18 months is probably feasible for one of these trucks, not too much different from a diesel version today. Next slide, please. I wanted to quickly show you what's under the hood. This goes back to being purpose-built. Everything is very clean and in place. We do have a sound generator on all of our trucks coming from the school bus world and being around children. We want to make sure that there's some sort of noise. There's no government mandate today that states there has to be a noise. There will be at one point in time. This is programmable because you cannot hear our truck between 0 and 20 miles per hour. So you can create the sound that you want, and you can create at what mile per hour that noise comes on to make sure people are notified that the truck is coming. Number 2 is the powertrain coolant. You have the washer fluid, and then you have the power steering fluid. You'll see in the middle, we do have the air ride suspension. And we also do maintain a radiator simply for the coolant. It helps with cooling our powertrain, our electric motor. So very clean, very simple. And from a maintenance standpoint, that's about it that you have to do as far as maintenance on these electric vehicles. Our batteries are sealed, our electric motor is sealed, and if they're broken, it voids the warranty. Everything else is standard truck components. So the PMs that come along with our truck are going to be the same that you would have for axle inspections, et cetera, just like you would have on a diesel. Next slide. Stefan, let me know how I'm doing on time too. I don't want to run over and impact Mark's presentation. I mentioned it earlier in regards to charging. so I won't spend a lot of time on this. But we talked about the fact that we're industry standard. We chose this for a reason. We did not want to go with proprietary charging because we know a lot of utilities are looking at light duty. You may have already adopted some hybrid electric pickup trucks. You may already have the hybrid electric bucket trucks. We wanted to go with what was standard, so this could be an addition to your fleet, not something that was new and foreign. One key point that I'd like to state is all of our vehicles are, it says V2G, but it's really V2X. We're going to have capability as the industry sets the standards for the V2X. We actually are going to be the first OEM that is going to be conducting a project. We're doing it on the school bus side with the school district in White Plains, New York. We're going to be writing a white paper on that where we're going to be learning about the impacts of V2G. And we are trying to be at the forefront of this as an OEM. From a LionEnergy standpoint, again, we're happy to help with the project management as far as understanding the ins and outs and capacities and capabilities of our vehicle, how we would set up a station or a facility to be able to accept the power, what would be needed from our end. Again, we're talking about a very intelligent audience here when it comes to power and electricity, so I don't think it's quite the same, but again, we do have resources to help in any way, shape, or form to knock down the barrier of and curiosity of how do I get to electric trucks that have capacity and battery packs of the size that we do. Next slide. Really what we're trying to do is differentiate ourselves as an OEM with being able to provide you the understandings and the ability and support at all levels. And I won't go into each of these, but I'll mention the ones that we did not talk about. We do have Lion Assistance 24/7 service. We do have a dedicated local team. The Bright Squad will be part of our Lion Experience Centers with the trained technicians. And we have created the first purpose-designed EV telematics system where if you have your own telematics systems already on your utility trucks, that's fine. This would be an addition. But we have built a really powerful system to track down to the batteries themselves as far as state of charge, how much is left, are they charging, well, how does the high voltage system look? Everything going on in the EV world that you would need to know as you take on an electric vehicle. We have partnered with a company to build this out and really make it customizable to what your needs are, even to the point where we will have the ability to have in-cab driver assistance to teach people how to drive the electric vehicle versus a diesel. So a lot of really cool technological advancements that we're working on, and we can really try to provide you a turnkey service from start to finish. Next slide. That's it. So again, thank you all for the time. I wanted to respect and make sure that Mark had enough time to get in his presentation as well. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. If we don't get to them today, please feel free to reach out to Stefan or Mike or myself directly, and I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you guys so much.
All right, thank you, Mark McGrew. I appreciate it. Just a quick clarification for you. You mentioned 12 to 18 months, so I'm guessing fourth quarter 2021 is your expected availability to ship off to an upfitter. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's where we are today. And again, a lot of that's going to be on the turnaround and timelines from the equipment suppliers. Right now, just from the chassis standpoint, we're at 6 to 9 months.
After receipt of order. Okay, thank you very much. You covered maintenance and service. We really appreciate that. No need to get into clarifications on hybrids or plug-in hybrids because you're an all-electric company. One question that sometimes comes up in Colorado is the cold and the altitude that we've got. I know being based in Montreal, I happen to have some relatives there. I expect you're rather familiar with cold, both cold vehicle operation and keeping the occupants warm. Is that an accurate statement, and how would you respond to anybody who has questions about surviving cold temperatures?
It's one of the biggest misnomers when it comes to electric vehicles is that they do not perform as well in cold weather. You're absolutely right. About 60% of our deployments in North America are in Canada. The rest of them are scattered throughout the U.S., but we also have some of our school buses in states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. And we've had no issues. And part of that has to do with the software. It's called the BMS, the battery management software, and how we program to keep those batteries at a stable temperature. And the ability to keep the batteries at a stable temperature ensures that the performance is there, and you do not see any sort of reduction in performance for the driver while it's out on route. So to date, I can tell you with the experience that we've had in these deployments, we've had no issue, number one, with being able to charge the vehicles or flow rate to get the vehicles recharged, as well as we've not had any issues whatsoever with the cold climates in regards to reduction in performance. What I will say, and it was on the slide with the truck, is where you do see reduction in the cold weather is simply because of the driver requesting the electric heat. We want the end user to be comfortable in the cab, but electric heat is highly inefficient. In fact, we've learned that it draws about 4 kilowatts for every hour of operation. So that does deter from the range. And I think that's a lot of what people hear, that electric vehicles don't perform as well in cold weather. It's not the performance, it's simply a loss of range simply because the drivers are wanting to keep the cabin warm. One other really cool feature that I'll mention is that in our cab, we have a programmable feature where at the end of the night, the driver can program the truck to turn on 20 minutes, 30 minutes prior to them coming into the vehicle while it's still on charge, and it will heat up the cab so that they get into a comfortable environment in the cold weather, so they're not getting into a cold vehicle, cold cab, and they're comfortable from the second they turn on the ignition and get rolling. So I hope that answered your question.
All right, thanks. Well, let's move along quickly to Mark Baer. Thanks again, Mark McGrew. Mark Baer is with Altec, and he's the Green Fleet Specialist there. We got his first slide up. Mark, please jump right in.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Appreciate everybody getting on the call today. Altec Industries, really we've been pursuing the EPTO space under encouragement from really our investor-owned utilities and others in North America, looking at the application and recognizing that a lot of times these bucket trucks aren't driving around all day, but they do sit at job sites roaring at a high idle. So that's our opportunity to focus on the job site and electrify and provide a nice quiet job site for everybody. Myself, I've been with Altec for 25 years now, started in '95 in the Pacific Northwest, taking care of customers in Washington and Alaska, but I did move down to California to be dedicated account manager to Pacific Gas and Electric. So I guess that's where I spent 10 or 15 years cutting my teeth on alt fuel and electrification with a very progressive customer, dare I say it. So we've been building, designing, and delivering EPTO systems for over 10 years now. And we have recently launched our next generation of products, our GEMS LE and SE. I guess for simplicity, that's a large and a small. EPTO systems for small aerials or for large aerials, quite frankly, the service class aerials, and then of course the line class aerials. Next slide, please. So again, the application is one that's a high idle application for us, and that's what we tackle to really do our best to provide a zero emissions job site. Next slide, please. So again, yeah, the fuel consumption, we burn between 1 and 2 gallons an hour. in PTO mode at the job site, depending on the aerial device, the chassis engine application, the load. So we're able to eliminate tailpipe emissions and noise at the job site. So this provides value not just in a reduction of fuel burn and clean air, but really for our customers in neighborhoods, for the crews that have possibly had a career-long scenario where they're working around diesel emissions. Diesel emissions, as you folks might know, are particularly nasty at idle, that the diesel after treatment systems don't necessarily work up to their full capacity when the engine's at idle. So the NOx, the oxides of nitrogen, poisonous gas, is particularly high around the job site in a idling truck. So crew health and well-being, and without the noise of a loud diesel roaring, there's also the opportunity, at least, to improve safety and communication within the folks at the job site. Next slide, please. I'd like to start off with our next generation battery pack that we are excited about. We've been looking at a company by the name of Bramo for probably 3 or 4 years. Almost a couple of years ago, Cummins purchased Bramo. So it's now a real good tier 1 supplier to OEMs that we're working with in our Cummins battery pack. Has a 3-year warranty, and then we prorate years 4 and 5 of the battery packs. You can kind of see it pictured off to the right as a 44 volt, 4.4 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's a lithium ion. It is a robust chemistry lithium ion that does have cobalt. We can take this all the way down to a 10% state of charge if it's a day's work that includes overtime. We may go through the battery pack, and of course if the hood is closed, it'll then auto start and the vehicle will run in standard mode so that the workday is not over when the electrification energy runs low. Next slide, please. So another big value point of the Cummins battery pack is battery warming. Simplistically, there are resistors in between the lithium cells that will use its own energy to warm itself up. And it looks like I've got a Canadian number here, but we're taking this under the -18°C. So as a lot of you folks likely know, that's around 0 degrees ambient in the US here, Fahrenheit. So big improvement for us because our previous generations of EPTO, really it prematurely ages the battery pack if we're trying to drag energy in and out of lithium and it's below freezing. So historically, the vehicle is auto started and run in diesel mode when the battery pack's core temperature gets below freezing. So again, added value, especially in and around Colorado, northern states, and Canada. Next slide, please. So this is a depiction of some of the boxes, if you will, associated with the EPTO systems. You can see the service class aerial has an air conditioning box, which is small on the passenger side, top of the compartment, our battery pack and equipment in the larger box, and then the electric motor is attached to the pedestal. And of course, there still is a mechanical PTO off of the transmission. Very low noise, and our boom speeds hydraulic pressure and flow match between EPTO and mechanical PTO. There's no boom speed variable that would encourage an operator to override the system. Good quick response from the interlock. Next slide, please. So the large aerial application is one where we've been able to reduce our weight considerably. It used to be a system that weighed over 1,200 pounds. We're down to 720 pounds now of payload impact for the 88 volt system on the large aerial application. Next slide, please. Again, kind of a review of where we used to be and where we've gone. We used to really utilize a secondary driveline that was a part of our EPTO architecture, and we've eliminated that. Secondary driveline was a bit of a maintenance characteristic, and our 10, 11 years of experience within this industry subsect, and as a leader, we've delivered over 8,000 GEMS, job site energy management systems, to customers throughout North America. So we've learned a lot about what we can do in the design of our next generation product that we've launched that optimize reliability and ease of use, performance, cold weather, all those things that are important. Next slide, please. So the GEMS SE, I think I've talked about it at length now, and this is for, really we go all the way up to a 48-foot aerial that does fit on the Class 5 application, whether it's a Ford or a Dodge, or now even Chevy International's getting into this Class 5, 6 chassis size, the pickup truck on steroids size of application, where we put as much aerial on as small a chassis as we can. So this is sized for a typical day's use, and we've got field evaluations are coming to an end. We've launched our product, real excited. Next slide. Some improvements in air conditioning and where we store our energy to make it easier for customers to locate. Next slide. Our controller is very simple, just a stated charge gauge through a series of lights. If they want to override it and run in diesel mode for whatever valid reason, then they press the override button. There's an indicator that confirms GEMS is active, so nobody is confused that the engine's off and everything is simply on demand. 12 volt support for all the lights and beacons and 12 volt accessories. We basically step down our voltage through inverters to 12 volts and keep a feed on those chassis batteries at all times. The inverter is also providing export power with the engine off, the aerial device obviously, and then also the HVAC in the cab. Next slide, please. So we use the OEM dials, which has been a big improvement for us over many historic generations, although we've been doing this for about 5 years, where we work with the OEMs to, I guess, simplistically use their system, but with our energy to support HVAC through the OEM vents, using those dials they're used to using, and get nice, robust air conditioning as well as heat through a standard operating procedure. Next slide. So again, we have automated anti-idle. In other words, on a Ford F-550, when it's in park, we'll be counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and shutting the engine off. This puts it into our GEMS mode, which is the electrification mode, and everything, all the features are on demand. Again, an operator can override it if they choose, but we've found the automated anti-idle optimizes our engine off time. Next slide, please. We have transitioned to the EV standard, the J plug, as it's often called. Most of our customers, I'm finding, are going to be using the EV adapter, meaning it's really an extension cord with the smart functionality of the J plug. The other end of it that's not pictured here is really just a three-pronged extension cord that will occupy a dedicated circuit, a 15 amp circuit. We're going to drag 12.5 amps at peak out of that 15 amp circuit. We can obviously take a level 1 charge if you have an existing EV charger. If it's a level 2 charger, we will step that down to 120 volts. So really, again, the idea is that these vehicles tend to be in the yard at night, and we have plenty of time to charge them. We get a full charge even if it's near empty, so to speak, a low state of charge. We can get that full charge in 4 to 5 hours at most. And generally it's 2-3 hours or more of charging to get to 100% and optimize our engine off time. Next slide, please. GEMS Connect is our data tool where we're tracking information on the engine off time. So it's not a telematics system that's going on about drive cycles and braking speeds, anything to do with, you know, the seat belts and all of those things that telematics providers focus on. They will still be doing so. GEMS Connect is a digital tool to help us observe the performance and utilization of each vehicle, as well as a customer's entire GEMS fleet. Next slide, please. So our portal for data, again, you can break this down into an individual vehicle asset or the whole fleet. It'll go on about the engine off time, is it being overridden, and for how long, plug-in times, air conditioning, heating, boom movement, boom out of stow. So a lot of telematics type features, but again, really just focused on the job site. And we will summarize that with emissions reductions that will convert the fuel burn, as well as the potential savings in fuel, as well as a factor that is quite possibly rivaling fuel savings in dollars right now, really because of the low price of diesel, the potential maintenance savings of not having a vehicle's engine hours driven up with somewhere between 3 to maybe even 6 hours a day of idling is hard on a diesel engine for a number of reasons. Again, those diesel after treatment systems can get plugged up if the vehicle's sitting around and idling all day. So that can be a maintenance characteristic or maybe even an expensive replacement. So GEMS Connect is our data tool focused on the job site. Next slide, please. So I think I've already, we don't really need to go on about what our data does, but a nice tool for fleet managers to observe the value of GEMS and its utilization. Next slide, please. We use our Altec Axis tool, which most of our customers likely already have, in that there's calibration adjustments and troubleshootings within our structures, within our equipment now that the Altec Axis service tool. So GEMS will be a part of that opportunity for diagnostics, calibration, and troubleshooting as well. Next slide. So kind of blew through that real quick, but if anybody has any questions, we will have a series of demos in Colorado for customers to utilize, introduce to crews, introduce the concept. If you don't have any ePTO systems now, and make sure they're comfortable with functionality and performance. Always good to get crew buy-in. And then maybe stepping away from the ePTO as a segment, Mark McGrew and other suppliers that have all electric like Lion today. We understand that our customers are asking for all electric applications, and quite frankly, so many of our customers sell electricity that it makes sense from that perspective in many ways. So we're eager to work with folks on the integration challenges we see as far as our boom structures. Where are we going to mount them and how are we going to mount them quite differently? Substructures, subframes, stability characteristics. So a bit of a science project, but we are eager to work with customers that look forward to this transition. And I think that's all I had to present. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Mark. We appreciate you taking the time to present to us. Good to see Altec's approach. I imagine that's supported at all your different or throughout your existing support locations across the country. You talked about cold weather performance. Thanks for mentioning that you can basically charge this thing off of a block heater plug in the overnight parking area. And I believe you mentioned the ETA and the timeline, but you said a couple of your test fleets are just wrapping up. What if customers were to order? What would you expect for availability on this product?
So adding GEMS to a custom build is not going to increase its lead time, really. It's not like there's even 40 hours of install within our final assembly building. So really, we all just plan ahead. And it is a bit unfortunate that the industry standard for lead times right now are backed up all the way to a year, but it does take time to get a chassis anyway. And folks should expect somewhere around a year for delivery from point of order.
Got it. Perfect. Well, thank you again for your presentation today. So to our participants, thank you guys for being a part of this. Well, we've heard from two completely different approaches today. One is an all-electric vehicle, and then the other is an anti-idle solution that provides you with engine off boom and the heating, ventilation, air conditioning that your workers will expect while that engine is off. So both of those are part of this clean diesel effort. And I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong here, Stefan, you could apply for one of each if you were interested.
That is correct, Mike. You are fully welcome and encouraged to apply for both. Perfect.
Well, I believe we did promise some discussion. We still have the majority of our attendees here. Only a few have dropped because of our little bit of overrun here. Is now the time to open it up to general conversation and unmute our participants, Stefan?
Yes, it is. So if anyone does want to voice a question and join the conversation, please enter that into the chat, or if you can raise your hand as one of the virtual functions with Zoom, please do that, and we will unmute you and bring you into the conversation.
Great, sounds good. I haven't seen any questions yet, but again, if you're attending, please go ahead and type that in. Any of the different panelists can answer questions that you might have. And Stefan, if we don't see any questions in, do we have the ability to unmute everybody at once and do general voice questions?
We don't have the ability to unmute everybody at once, unfortunately.
That's okay. All right, well, again, raise your hand with the buttons there in Zoom, or type a request into the chat to ask a question, and then we will unmute you. It looks like we have one hand raised there, Dave Reed. The hand popped up for a moment. Maiza, by the way, I should say thank you to Maiza, who's CLEER's magic person behind the green curtain today. So thank you, Maiza, for assisting in making this a success.
Yes, I would be remiss if we didn't give a huge thank you to Maisa for helping us.
You guys are so welcome. Great job. And I don't see anybody raising their hands.
Okay. Dave Reed did briefly, and then I also see a note next to Curtis. Both Curtis and Dave, you are able to talk now if you have questions.
Dave Reed, I was just saying that I thought I saw some questions in the Q&A.
Yes, and they have been answered.
Okay.
So, yeah, one of our Q&A questions was, why are we not allowed to fund anything before 1996? The answer to that was a requirement related to the Federal Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. And then if anybody can remind me what the other question was.
There was a question about, as I looked at it or read the question, it was about waiting for funding, that you order it now, you apply for the funding appropriately, and then, as I assume, the funding is, so to speak, banked until delivery.
That is correct. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And Stefan, jump in if you'd like, but the basics from Stefan's presentation are you apply. If you're selected, that funding is set aside and secured for you. Now, it's not released, obviously. The release requirements are you have to get your new truck, you have to dispose of or scrap your old truck, and you got to get your paperwork in order. Once those three steps are done, then that funding that was previously approved, perhaps a year prior due to lead times, that funding would then be released to you upon delivery. So we realize that is an interesting situation, but that's how the program runs, and we can secure those dollars so that your organization will get them upon completion of those steps. Again, truck delivery, scrapping the old one, and paperwork in order.
That's exactly right. Couldn't articulate it better. And just to, try and keep CLEER's reputation as pristine as we can, we don't make those guidelines. That is how, the requirements of the funding from the EPA itself. So we wish that we could have a more expedited process for releasing this funding and do that, so that as soon as you issue your purchase order, we could release the funding, but we are simply unable to do that per the requirements that come with the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act.
All right. Thank you guys again for presentations that you obviously spent a bunch of time producing and then bringing to us today, both of the marks. I'm looking at the chat, not seeing any questions. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we covered was availability for products. I think we've been through that for each of the two. The other one was maintenance and serviceability. Thanks to both of you guys for addressing that as part of your conversation today. Both of you touched on cold weather performance, that these vehicles have either already been or have proven methods to handle the realities of cold temperature operation. We all know that utilities need reliable uptime. And you both did a good job of covering how those systems run. One entirely electric, and then the other being an electric backup, where the truck continues to maintain all of its diesel functions, including diesel backup operation of PTO, but has a plug-in while at home electrification tool, so that when you're out on the job site with the Alltech solution, it runs electrically until depleted, most days, hopefully, running without any need to go into the post-charge diesel operation. So two compelling products. Any last items that we need to touch on before we wrap up today's presentation, Stefan?
I don't think so. Yeah, I just want to reiterate my gratitude to all of the attendees and our panelists. We really appreciate you taking the time this morning. And we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar along with the slides and some additional resources to all of our attendees. And if you do think of a question for either myself or Mike or either of our panelists, our contact information will be provided as well. So we will be available to help with any questions that you may have once we jump off this webinar. And thanks again, everyone, for attending.